There are things about the land of Oo that the show never fully explained. Not because the writers forgot, and not because they ran out of time, though that happened too sometimes. Some things were left open on purpose. Some were dangled in front of the audience for years and then quietly set aside. Some were answered halfway, in a way that resolved the surface and left everything underneath still moving, still unresolved, still asking questions in the dark. Those are the things we're going to talk about tonight. Get comfortable. This is going to take a while. There is a scene in a season 6 episode called Gold Stars. The Lich, wearing the body of the small child he has become, Sweet Pea, surfaces for a moment when two con men push him too far. He doesn't attack them with fire or plague. He does something quieter and more disturbing. He opens his mouth and shows them something. And as the world around them fills with black smoke, a voice speaks through Sweet Pea's small throat in a register that does not belong to a child. Before there was time, he says. Before there was anything, there was nothing. He pauses. The pause carries weight, and before there was nothing, there were monsters. The camera shows them. Vast, writhing, golden things pressing against each other in a void that doesn't have dimensions because dimensions hadn't been invented yet. Not metaphorical monsters, not symbolic ones, actual primordial entities that existed before the concept of existence had formed, before the Big Bang, before matter, before space itself. The Lich shows the two men this vision, and their minds break a little from what they see, and then Sweet Pea snaps back, and the scene ends, and the show moves on, and never, ever tells you what any of that actually meant. That is, Adventure Time doing what it does best. It opens a door, it lets you look through it, and then it quietly closes it again before you can get your foot in the frame. But some of us have been standing at that door for years, leaning against it, trying to hear what's on the other side. So, let's talk about the questions that survived. And before we go any deeper, I want to hear from you. If you're watching this at 2 in the morning, in bed, with headphones in, or on a bus somewhere, or wherever you've ended up tonight, drop it in the comments. Tell me where you are and what time it is where you're watching from. I genuinely want to know where all of you are in the world right now. Let's start with the oldest unsolved mystery in the show. Not the most dramatic, not the one with the biggest cosmic implications, the one that is oldest, the one that was sitting underneath everything before anyone realized this show was going to become the kind of show that had a mythology at all. What exactly happened the night Simon Petrikov spent with Margles on Olympus Mons? You have to understand who Magic Man is, and was, before you can understand why this question matters as much as it does. Magic Man, who eventually became King Man in the show's later seasons, was not always the cruel, meandering nuisance who spent 200 years on Earth turning people into giant body parts and spreading misery as what he called, with a complete lack of irony, a magical life lesson. He was a Martian. He lived on Mars with his wife, Margles, and his brother, Grob Gob Glob Grod, the four-faced deity who served as the protector and king of that planet. He was, by all available accounts, normal, competent, known. He was a renowned practitioner of magic. He had people who loved him and a life that made sense. Then Golb came. Golb attacked Mars. The show never depicts this directly. It gives it to us through implication and fragments, the way the most devastating things in Adventure Time are always given. Golb is the entity that the show's entire cosmology is built around being afraid of, the embodiment of chaos itself, the force that unmakes rather than destroys. And when it came to Mars, it took people. The way it takes things is not killing them in any straightforward sense. It is removing them, consuming them in a way that means they are not anywhere anymore, not in the afterlife, not in an alternate timeline, not waiting somewhere to be found, gone in a way that Prismo himself, whose power operates on the logic that nothing is ever truly gone, cannot reverse. Margulis was one of the people Golb took. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, told Finn that Magic Man used to be different before that night on Olympus Mons. Before whatever happened, there changed him into what he became. The phrase the show uses is precise and terrible. Before that night with Margles, not during the attack, not when she was taken by Golb. The night on Olympus Mons is a separate event, placed on the timeline after Golb's initial attack, and it seems to be the night that finally broke something in Magic Man that had already been badly stressed. Olympus Mons is, incidentally, not a fictional place. It is the real name of the tallest known mountain in the solar system. It sits on Mars. The show placed Magic Man's tragedy at a real Martian location, which is either a cosmological detail or a sign that the Adventure Time writers wanted to anchor the impossible in the actual, the way the best impossible stories always anchor themselves in something you can look up and confirm is real. The implication the show floats is that the defense system Magic Man built a magical automated version of Margles herself, her image encoded into a weapon system, her name an acronym, Magical Automated Resistance Generating Laser Energy Supplier, failed on Olympus Mons. The constructed Margles fell from the mountain. The defense system built out of his grief became the instrument of a second loss, a replica of the thing he had already lost, failing in front of him at the highest point on an entire planet. Betty Groff, during a ritual in the episode You Forgot Your Floaties, witnessed this through Margles' perspective. She put on a mask that had been Margles in some metaphysical sense, and she saw what Margles had seen. A man building a defense from his own nightmares, a grief that became architecture and then collapsed. And even Prismo, the wish-granting entity who exists outside of time itself, could not bring the real Margles back. He tried. When Magic Man went to Prismo's time room and made a wish for her return, all Prismo produced was a wastebasket and a small basketball hoop. He couldn't reach her. She wasn't anywhere he could access, which means that Golb has a kind of finality to it that no other force in the Adventure Time universe possesses. Not death in the ordinary sense, not the death that Prismo can navigate around, or that the show's various magical systems can challenge. Something beyond that, something that erases not just life, but the possibility of return. The show never told us what specifically happened at Olympus Mons. Was it GOLB that directly caused the defense system's failure, or was it something else? Was the night on Olympus Mons the same night as Golb's attack, or years later? The evidence points in slightly different directions, depending on which episode you're in, and the show never pulled the threads into a clear account. What it gave us instead was the shape of the tragedy without its exact contours, the loss that bent a good man into something cruel and wandering. The specific flavor of grief that the show returns to again and again in different bodies. The person who survives after the person they loved has gone somewhere they cannot follow. Simon and Betty, Magic Man and Margles, Marceline, and everyone she has outlived. The same wound in different forms, the same unreachable loss creating the same restless damage. They all end up doing extreme things in the wake of it. Magic Man made misery his profession for 2 centuries. Simon held on to a crown that was erasing him because it was the only thing keeping him alive to be useful. Marceline played her grief into bass guitar and stayed in a cave for stretches of time that would feel like solitude to anyone watching and feel like something else entirely from the inside. The mystery of what happened to Margulis is technically a small one. She's a supporting character. She never speaks in any meaningful sense. She exists only in the margins of Magic Man's arc. But she represents something the show never fully resolved about Golb itself, the entity that would go on to be the final antagonist of the series. Because if Golb can take people so completely that even Prismo can't undo it, then what does that mean for everyone who entered Golb's body in the finale? What does it mean for Betty? We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the Lich, because the Lich is the most genuinely unsolvable character in the show's mythology, and that unsolvability is not an accident or an oversight. It is the point. The show gives you multiple origins for the Lich, and it gives them all to you without resolving them into one. This is not sloppy writing. The show was built by people who understood that the most ancient and terrible things resist singular explanation. They have too much history. They predate the kind of coherent narrative that any one account can contain. So here is what we know, and here is where it stops being what we know. The Lich's essence arrived on Earth millions of years ago, carried inside or as a catalyst comet. The green comet seen in the episode Evergreen, which is set hundreds of millions of years in the past during the age of dinosaurs, bore a striking resemblance to the Lich, green, horned, carrying an energy that the ice elemental urgent's Evergreen recognized as a force of extinction. That comet caused the event that wiped out the dinosaurs. It ended the dominant form of life on Earth and made space for everything that came after. The Lich, or the essence that would become the Lich, was the mechanism of that extinction. Then, millions of years later, during the Mushroom War, the mutagenic bomb created the physical conditions the Lich needed. He emerged from a person submerged in mutagenic waste, a host body transformed by the bomb's effects, and the ancient extinction force that had been cycling through the universe finally had a vessel. He became the creature Billy defeated and sealed in amber, the creature Finn and Jake faced across the early seasons of the show. That's one account, the Comet account, the one where the Lich is a cosmic force of extinction that has been cycling through the universe, ending life wherever it finds it, since before there were any humans to be afraid of it. Then there's the Gold Stars account, the one where the Lich, inside Sweet Pea's body, stands in front of the king of Ooh and Toronto and shows them what came before the Big Bang. The one where he implies, and it is an implication, never stated outright that he was one of those things. One of the primordial monsters that writhed in the void before the universe existed, before time started, before matter coalesced into anything. Not born from the universe, predating it. The Adventure Time Wiki notes that these two accounts sit alongside each other without reconciliation. TV Tropes describes it as a multiple choice past, but I don't think that phrase captures what the show is actually doing. The honest reading isn't that the writers were inconsistent. The honest reading is that the Lich is old enough that any single origin story would be inadequate. He is a river that has been running long enough that you cannot point to one source. He is the accumulation of every extinction, every ending, every moment when life stopped and something ancient pressed through the gap. There is also a third account, layered on top of the first two. In the episode Whispers, the Lich describes himself as the ceaseless wheel, the last scholar of Golb. A scholar, not a servant, not a creation, not a minion, a scholar. Someone who has studied something and organized their entire existence around that study, who has learned from a greater force and is carrying out a mission they believe in at the level of intellectual devotion. The Lich wants to end all life not out of hatred or malice, but because he understands what he is studying well enough to know what it requires. His purpose and his conviction are the same thing. The show gives you all three versions: Comet, primordial monster, devoted scholar of chaos, and never picks one. What the show does not tell you, and what remains genuinely open, is what the relationship between the Lich and Golb actually is. Golb is chaos. The Lich is entropy, the death of all things. They are not the same. The Lich worships Golb in some sense, or at least devotes himself to honoring Golb through his purpose. But we don't know if the Lich is a creation of Golb, a fragment of Golb, a fellow traveler who chose alignment, or something else entirely. We don't know if Golb is aware of the Lich's devotion, or simply indifferent to it. We don't know, when the Lich was transformed into Sweet Pea, whether any fragment of that cosmic devotion was erased or simply sleeping. Sweet Pea has nightmares. The show tells us this explicitly in Gold Stars. He wakes up clutching his blanket in the night, and Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig come in and hold him through it. The Lich surfaces in those nightmares, in the black smoke and the fire, and the memory of everything he was before he became a child who is loved. Sweet Pea doesn't understand those dreams yet. He thinks they're just dreams. The question that the show leaves open is whether they are. There is a character named Cuber who hosts the Graybles episodes. He appears at the show's margins, a small blue alien from the far future who collects visual stories called Graybles about the inhabitants of the land of Oo the way someone else might collect antique photographs. He is cheerful. He is essentially harmless. He loves his job. In one episode, the episode called Graybles 1000 Plus, Kuber crash lands on Oo a full 1,000 years after the events of the show's main timeline. He wanders through a muted, altered version of the world Finn and Jake called home. The candy colors are gone. The Candy Kingdom is transformed in ways that suggest either extended war or extreme time or both. The tree fort has grown into something enormous and unoccupied. As Cuber escapes back to his ship and flies through the mountains, he passes the Ice Kingdom. What he sees there is not the Ice King. Not exactly. It is a flying creature of white hair and long nose, enormous and seemingly deranged. A face made of beard and ice, and something that has gone further in whatever direction it was going than anyone planned. When this episode aired in 2015, the show left it completely unexplained. Fans spent 3 years deciding what it meant. The most common reading was that Simon had finally lost himself entirely, that the crown had completed its work and turned him into something that wasn't human anymore, not in any recoverable sense, a thing that used to be a man. Then the finale aired in 2018 and answered the question. Sort of. The creature in the future isn't Simon. It is, in fact, Gunter the penguin, who picked up the crown after Simon was freed from it inside Golb's body. The crown interacted with Gunter's deepest desire, which was to be like the Ice King, who had been kind to the penguin during centuries of wandering. The crown made Gunter into the Ice Thing, a cheerful ice wizard who carries the aesthetic and the power of the Ice King without any of the tragedy. In the finale, the Ice Thing is warm. It married Turtle Princess. It was, by every visible indication, fine. So, the show said, that creature in Graybles is the Ice Thing, Gunter, 1,000 years after the finale. The identity question was answered, but here is what wasn't sealed. The creature in Graybles 1000 plus looked deranged. It looked wrong. It looked like something that had gone too far in the same direction the Ice King always threatened to go. The Ice Thing, as depicted in the series finale, was cheerful and apparently stable. Does 1,000 years of wearing the crown change the Ice Thing into what Cuber saw? Does the crown continue to erode whoever wears it, even someone whose deepest desire was something as warm and uncomplicated as wanting to be like the person who was kind to them? Gunther's wish was sweet. The Ice King's wish was desperate. Does sweetness protect against what the crown does, or does it just take longer? The show answered the identity. It left the trajectory open. And given the crown's history across 65 million years of Evergreen's template, that open trajectory feels deliberate and unsettling. Now let's talk about a man named Martin Mertens, because Martin Mertens is one of the most carefully constructed frustrations in television. He is the antagonist of Finn's backstory, who never resolves into a revelation or a redemption. He is not a monster, which is the thing that makes him hardest to categorize. He is something specific and real and difficult. A person who has made a sustained choice over decades to prioritize himself and who has found enough charm and enough motion to stay ahead of what that choice has cost everyone around him. What we know about him is assembled from fragments, the way most of Adventure Time's important truths are assembled. He was originally from the human islands. He was a hider, which was what the islands people called the ones who tried to leave the protected settlements and venture into the wider world. He met Minerva Campbell, a doctor who would become Finn's mother, and they were a family for a while. When it became necessary to get baby Finn off the islands, Martin went with him. They were separated at sea. Finn ended up in the forest where Joshua and Margaret found him. Martin ended up somewhere else, possibly injured, possibly permanently changed by whatever happened to him out there. There is a promotional image, cited in various discussions of the character, that depicts Martin with evidence of a brain injury, the implication being that the man who wandered away from his baby son in the wilderness was not quite the same man who had loved Minerva and fought to protect Finn when things got dangerous. That something broke in the sea that left him with the charm and the self-preservation instinct and the wandering, but without whatever, held those things together into something capable of real attachment. That's the sympathetic account, the accident account. But the show also tells you that Martin was imprisoned in the Crystal Citadel, the cosmic prison for beings who have committed what Prismo describes as universal crimes. The Citadel is not a place for regular criminals. Prismo explains that its inmates are those who cause damage just by their existence. The scale required for Citadel imprisonment is enormous. Whatever Martin did, the universe determined it required containment. Finn went to the Citadel expecting to find his father as a guard. He was a prisoner. We never learn what the crime was, not with certainty. The show hints at a connection to the Lich, to the Green Catalyst Comet, to the events surrounding the Mushroom War and the mutagenic bomb. Some of the circumstantial threads suggest Martin's imprisonment was connected to the same catastrophic sequence that produced the Lich's physical form, but the show never states it. Martin, when Finn asks him directly why he abandoned him, gives nonsensical, evasive answers. He says he can't remember. He implies he doesn't see it that way. He talks about burning enough bridges that the only direction is forward. The show gives him one genuine moment of redeeming complexity. In the flashback episode, Min and Marty, we see Martin fighting desperately to protect infant Finn, making real sacrifices to keep his son safe. That person existed. Whatever happened between that father and the drifting con man Finn encountered in the Citadel, something was lost or broken in the intervening years. And then a purple catalyst comet arrives, and offers to take Martin to a higher plane of existence, beyond the physical universe, beyond consequence, beyond the need to be anything or anyone in particular. He accepts. Of course he does. He leaves his son behind. Finn watches him go and says, quietly, "There's no changing you, I guess." And the show says nothing more about him. The mystery of Martin Mertens is not what crime he committed. It's deeper than that, and stranger. It's the question of what the show was saying about the specific kind of person who keeps choosing themselves again and again across decades and cosmic adventures, and who eventually finds a way to transcend rather than reckon. Adventure Time usually redeems its complex characters. The Ice King gets Simon back. Magic Man becomes King Man. Even the Lich becomes Sweet Pea. Martin just leaves. The show left that open on purpose. Some people are not redeemed. That is also something worth sitting with. There is a book that Finn and Jake retrieve in the very first produced episode of the series. The Enchiridion, a guide to heroism, presented to righteous heroes after a series of trials. Finn gets it as a child on his first real adventure, and it appears again and again across the show's run, gaining significance as the mythology deepens. By the time of the Season 4 finale, the Enchiridion has become something much more than a handbook. It can open portals between dimensions. It is capable of tearing holes in the fabric of the multiverse when its gemstones are properly arranged and the right consciousness directs it. The Lich uses Finn's destroyed version of it to create a portal to the Crystal Citadel. An alternate version in the Farmworld timeline serves the same function. The question the show raises and does not answer is, who made it? And why did a heroism handbook also turn out to be a multiversal key? The Enchiridion is ancient. Simon Petrikov and Betty found it together before the Mushroom War in the Hindu Kush mountain range, but it clearly predates them by a very long margin. It was already legendary, already mythologized, already operating as a sacred object with extensive trials designed to evaluate the worthiness of the person who sought it. The show never identifies the original creator. It never explains how a book intended as a guide to heroism became simultaneously a door into every dimension in the multiverse, or whether those were always the same function. Think about that second reading for a moment. If the Enchiridion was always a multiversal key, and the heroism guidelines were the locking mechanism, then the trials to obtain it weren't just character tests, they were security protocols. The door only opens for someone sufficiently good. The universe is guarded by the condition of righteousness. The book doesn't care if you're strong or powerful or intelligent. It cares if you have the right qualities inside you, and those qualities are the key. That reading would change the entire framing of Finn's heroic journey. He didn't just happen to find a useful magical artifact. He was the kind of person the universe built a door for. The Enchiridion was destroyed in the Season 4 finale, when Finn shattered it to prevent the Lich from using it to access the multiverse. A Farmworld version was also destroyed shortly after. The question of its origin was never answered because the physical objects that might have anchored the answer were gone. All that remains is the question hanging in the place where the book used to be. There is something deeply Adventure Time about that. The artifact that could have explained itself was destroyed before anyone thought to ask. Let me talk about Peppermint Butler, because Peppermint Butler is the show's longest-running joke that stopped being a joke very early on, and the show just kept treating it as if it was one. He was introduced in the premiere episode of the series as Princess Bubblegum's loyal candy butler. Small, sweet in appearance, courteous in behavior. He carries things and opens doors and maintains the operations of the Candy Kingdom with the quiet competence of someone who has been doing this for a very long time. He is also, as the show gradually reveals, over years of casual asides and background details, a practitioner of dark magic with connections that stretch into the land of the dead, the Nitosphere, and apparently the personal schedule of death itself. The episode Death in Bloom, early in the show's run, established that Peppermint, Butler, and Death are close friends, not acquaintances, friends. The kind of friends who do significant favors for each other without requiring explanation. When Finn mentions Peppermint Butler's name to Death, Death immediately becomes cooperative and helpful in ways he wouldn't be for strangers. That friendship is not explained. It predates any events the show depicts. It is simply there, already established, already warm, already decades or centuries deep. In Return to the Nitosphere, there is a photograph visible in the background, not discussed, not pointed at, just there showing Hunson Abadir, the ruler of the Nitosphere, and Marceline's father, playing golf. His caddy is Peppermint Butler. They are casual with each other. They are comfortable. Whatever their relationship is, it did not begin yesterday. In Death in Bloom, Peppermint Butler tells Finn and Jake that as payment for the assistance he provided in entering the land of the dead, he will steal the flesh from their sleeping bodies. He says this and then laughs it off, or seems to. Finn and Jake still have their flesh, but the show plants the possibility that this was not entirely a joke, and then moves on without confirming or denying anything. In later seasons, the show built out his dark magic practice more explicitly. He has summoned demons. He has cast rituals that would horrify the Candy People if they knew what was happening in the basement. He sensed the Lich's possession of Princess Bubblegum in mortal recoil by hissing like a cat, which is not a skill most candy butlers need to develop. He infused Finn's new sword with Nightosphere magic at Hunson Abadir's request in one episode, demonstrating a level of comfortable facility with extremely dark magical forces that implies years of practice and established relationships. The Distant Lands Special Wizard City addressed his origin more directly than any main series episode had, depicting a younger Peppermint Butler reset to something like a child after events in the finale, reduced him to a baby who was raised over again by Bubblegum and Marceline, attending wizard school and dealing with the suspicion that follows him because of his known history. The special reveals more, but still does not fully explain the depth of his original power, the full nature of his connections, or what specifically he spent the centuries before the show doing. The question the show consistently raises about Peppermint Butler is this: why does Princess Bubblegum keep him? She knows what he is. She has known for centuries. She is the ruler of a kingdom she created and controls and monitors with careful attention. She does not make careless choices about who operates inside her structures of power. Peppermint Butler's dark connections and dark magic are not unknown to her. They are tolerated, possibly welcomed, possibly actively utilized in ways the show hints at, but never states. The room beneath the Candy Kingdom that the show has referenced without fully exploring, the one associated with the darker machinery of Bubblegum's governance and security, is implied to be connected to Peppermint Butler's activities. The shadow infrastructure of the kingdom has a shape. Peppermint Butler is part of that shape. The show is content to let you feel the outline of it without telling you what exactly is inside the room. The cosmic owl is one of those questions that the show almost answered and then, in the answering, made stranger. He first appears in the episode Prisoners of Love, inside Ice King's dream. He tells the Ice King he is a sociopath, He shows up again in The New Frontier at the end of Jake's Croak dream, and the show establishes that it's common knowledge in Ooh that when the cosmic owl appears in your dream, that dream is prophetic. It will come true. His presence is the guarantee. The episode Hoots in season 6 revealed more about him. He is lonely. He lives in a motel made of stars. He has a closet full of single player board games arranged for someone who spends a lot of time alone. He has a device that produces dream tokens, which he spends to enter people's dreams and make them prophetic. Prismo mentions in this episode that the cosmic owl was put in charge of prophetic dreams, which implies a hierarchy, someone or something above Prismo's level that assigns cosmic functions and enforces them. A later episode, The Bird and the Clock, gave his backstory. He was one of two prankster brothers who lived at the edge of the cosmos at the dawn of creation. They ate something they were forbidden to eat. One brother betrayed the other to escape punishment. The betrayed brother was erased from existence. The traitor was transformed into a cosmic entity, condemned to make mortal dreams come true forever. The loneliness that the episode Hoots made so palpable has its context now. The cosmic owl carries the knowledge that he exists because he betrayed the only other being who was like him. He makes dreams real as his eternal punishment, sentenced to witness the importance of what he does while knowing he originally didn't deserve it. Every dream that comes true because he entered it is, in some sense, the echo of something he took from his brother. But the backstory opens as many questions as it closes. What were the brothers before? What did they eat? And why was it forbidden? And by whom was it forbidden? What was the structure of early cosmic existence that had rules specific enough to assign eternal punishments? Who decided that the punishment for the cosmic crime these brothers committed was transformation into a function? Prismo says the cosmic owl was put in charge of prophetic dreams, which implies someone or something with the authority to put cosmic entities in charge of things. That something is never named. Prismo himself is part of this unspoken hierarchy. He grants wishes but cannot override Golb. The cosmic owl makes dreams real but can apparently be killed. He was killed briefly in one episode, shot by Huntress Wizard, and resurrected by his brother, the karmic worm, whose existence raises its own questions. If the cosmic owl's brother was supposed to have been erased, how does the karmic worm exist? The show plants these questions and never assembles them into a system diagram. The cosmic bureaucracy of Adventure Time is enormous and apparently functional and essentially unexplained at every level above the characters you can actually speak to. That might be the honest choice. The show is about characters who operate within a universe they don't fully understand, making choices inside forces that are too large and too old to comprehend. Explaining the whole system would change the show into something colder, but it does leave the question sitting there, open and curious. What exactly is running this place? Who assigned the cosmic functions? What does it mean that the universe has bureaucratic roles that beings can be condemned into, or promoted out of, or given stewardship over? And what entity has enough authority over the whole structure that even Prismo defers to it? The mystery of what Golb actually wanted from Margles is different from the mystery of what happened to her. That one is about loss and grief and the specific limits of cosmic magic. This one is about Golb's behavior and what that behavior suggests about Golb's nature. Golb is the embodiment of chaos. He is the force that the Lich serves, the being who Magic Man built an entire defense system to keep away from Mars, who appears at the threshold between life and whatever is not life, whenever something crosses the boundary. He appears in the episode Puhoi when an alternate version of Finn dies of old age in a pillow dimension and begins his transit between states of existence. Golb is there, waiting, mouth open. Chaos, as a force, doesn't want things. It doesn't have goals. It doesn't make selections based on preference or value. It is a force. But Golb took Margles specifically. It took her, and not other Martians, in a way that was permanent, in a way that other deaths in the show's universe are not permanent. That specificity raises a question that the show never answers. Was it random? Was Margles simply the one whose loss mattered enough for anyone to notice the pattern? Or was Golb's taking of Margles a targeted act, something responsive rather than indiscriminate? The show also establishes, through You Forgot Your Floaties, that Golb had appeared near Mars long before the events of the series. The confrontation with Golb that broke Magic Man was not Golb's first contact with the solar system. He had been near this part of the universe before the main events of the show, which means Golb's arrival in U during the series finale was not a first contact. It was a return. He had already been here, in some form, at some scale. Was the finale Golb coming back to a place it had touched before, following threads it had already started? Was Magic Man's tragedy on Mars part of the same sequence of Golb's approach that eventually produced the finale? Are the events of the whole show, in some sense, Golb completing something it began on Mars centuries before Finn was born? The show does not answer this. What it gives you is the trail of Golb's presence through history. Mars centuries before the main events, the Mushroom War, which the Lich's connection to Golb's purpose implicates in the Chaos entity's long game. Finn's death vision in Puhoi, the finale, evidence of a pattern, no statement of the pattern's meaning. There's a mystery that lives in the background of every episode with an outdoor scene, and it is one that the show chose never to make the center of attention, even as it never let it disappear. The ruins. Adventure Time Wiki documented them episode by episode across the show's entire run. Old highway bridges in fields, their concrete cracked and vines wrapping the structural steel. Military vehicles half buried in mud, their paint long gone, their shapes recognizable if you know what you're looking for. A broken fighter plane visible in the background of a scene that has nothing to do with the old world. License plates and traffic cones, and the remains of subway tunnel infrastructure present in the margins of episodes, not as set dressing, but as archaeology. The show was always telling you, quietly, in the corner of the frame, that this had all been something else once. And one particular detail that the Adventure Time Wiki specifically noted, a penny visible in the episode King of Mars, on which the year reads 20XX, placing the end of the old world, the Mushroom War, the bombs, the civilization that produced all these ruins, not in some distant historical era, but in the 21st century, our century. The ruins Finn and Jake are running past are not from ancient history. They are from something that looks like now, or close enough to now that the difference doesn't matter. The land of U is Earth in roughly 2800 CE. If you follow the 1,000-year timeline the show establishes, that penny is from our time. The collapsed overpasses and the rusted highway signs are from our time. The businessmen in the iceberg in the Season 1 episode Business Time, whose presence accidentally created the show's entire mythology, were people from our world or something nearly indistinguishable from it. The show has never fully reckoned with what that means. It leaves it visible, always, in the corner of every outdoor scene, but never brings it to the foreground. It is content to let you feel the weight of it, rather than naming it directly. But what was the civilization that built all those things? Not in terms of its geopolitical structure or its history. Those aren't the interesting questions. The interesting question is what its relationship was to the magical life that grew from its ruins. Were there people in the old world who knew that the bomb they were building would transform life rather than simply destroy it? Were there people who understood what the mutagenic weapon would do and chose to use it anyway? Were there people trying to stop it who failed? The show gives you the Mushroom War as the context for everything and then refuses to narrate it. You only ever see its shadow. Its presence is in the ruins and in the characters who survived it and in the thousand-year history that grew on top of it. The war itself is absent from the record, the way the most catastrophic things tend to be absent from the record, because the people who could have written it down were not in a position to write anything. Peppermint Butler's origin raises another question that connects back to Princess Bubblegum in a way the show never fully untangled. Princess Bubblegum created the Candy People. She did not simply build them, she gave them life in a way that she feels responsible for, in the profound and complicated way that a parent feels responsible, multiplied by the fact that she made the choice to create them at all. That weight is present across the entire show, in the way she governs, in the why of her autocratic tendencies, in her compulsive working and building and monitoring. But Peppermint Butler, specifically, is one of her oldest creations. He has been in the Candy Kingdom from the very beginning of it. His dark magic connections predate the events of the show by centuries at minimum, which means that whatever Peppermint Butler became the Dark Wizard with Death as a personal friend and Hunson Abadir as a golf companion, he became that under Princess Bubblegum's watch and with her implicit or explicit awareness. The show floats the possibility, never confirmed, that Princess Bubblegum created Peppermint Butler specifically for purposes that required his dark connections. Not as a mistake, the way Lemon Grab was a mistake, but as an intentional tool, the shadow side of a kingdom that presents itself as bright and sweet and safe. Lemon Grab himself is a confirmed mistake. Bubblegum has said so. Her first attempt to create new life, she will tell you, went wrong. Lemon Grab is constitutionally unwell, neurotic and tyrannical, and incapable of functioning in ordinary social reality, and she takes responsibility for that, the way you take responsibility for something you made wrong and cannot unmake. She did not intend him to be what he became. But Peppermint Butler is not Lemon Grab. He functions. He is extremely competent. His darkness is organized and purposeful, and apparently exactly calibrated for whatever role he plays in the Candy Kingdom's infrastructure. That suggests design. The show never confirmed this. It let the possibility exist in the structure of who Peppermint Butler is and how Bubblegum relates to him without ever stating it plainly. Whether that silence was intentional, mystery planting, or simply a thread the writers didn't pull before the show ended is itself something we don't know. Let's spend time with a question that the fandom has been turning over for years because it is genuinely unresolved and genuinely matters. Fern. Fern was the Finn sword, formed when an alternate timeline version of Finn collapsed into the object during the events of the Farm World arc. The Finn sword was an artifact that carried the consciousness or essence of that alternate Finn, and it sat in Finn's possession for episodes while he carried it as a weapon without fully understanding what it contained or who was in it. When the grass sword that had been growing around Finn's arm merged with the Finn sword, the resulting being was Fern, a grass entity shaped exactly like Finn, carrying his memories and mannerisms and some of his identity while being distinctly not Finn. Fern spent most of his appearances wrestling with what that meant. He had Finn's face and Finn's sense of himself, but not Finn's life, not the ongoing experience of being the specific person he appeared to be. He was a copy without the original's continuity. The show treated his crisis of identity with genuine seriousness. What does it mean to be a version of someone when the person you're a version of is standing right next to you, still being that person? What is the relationship between identity and continuous experience? If you have all of someone's memories and none of their ongoing life, are you them? Fern eventually made what the show framed as a sacrifice. In the episode Three Buckets, and in the lead up to the series finale, Fern's grass body became unstable, consumed by Uncle Gumbald's manipulation and by his own nature's contradictions. He was transformed into a tree, and from the tree grew a seedling, and Finn planted the seedling in the ground where the tree house used to stand. The implication was clear enough. Fern ended as a discrete being, but something of him persisted in the plant that grew. The show followed this to a point. By the time of the Distant Lands specials, the landscape around what used to be the tree fort has changed significantly. New characters, Shermie and Beth, live in or near the transformed area. The world has moved forward, but the show never told us what Fern experienced in the transition. Was the transformation from grass being to tree a death? Was there any awareness on the other side of it, any continuation of the consciousness that had been wrestling so hard with what it meant to exist as a copy? The seedling that grew from his remains became something. The landscape carries his material, remains. Does it carry anything else? This is speculation the show provides no direct answer. But the framing of Fern's arc sits uncomfortably close to questions the show raises elsewhere about consciousness and persistence and what love can do for people who seem to have been lost. The show's consistent argument across its run is that identity survives more than we expect. Simon persisted underneath the Ice King for 1,000 years. Prismo persists as a dream. Minerva persists as a network of robots. If the show is right about persistence, what does that mean for the being that became a tree? There is a theory that Betty Groff developed while she was alive and studying magic users in Ook. She called it the magic madness sadness hypothesis. The idea, assembled from her research into multiple practitioners across the land of Oo and beyond, was that magic use correlates with tragedy, tragedy correlates with madness, and madness then drives further magic use in an attempt to solve or escape the tragedy. A loop, a self-sustaining cycle, not unique to any one person, but visible across many. Simon and the Crown, Magic Man and Margles, Marcelin's father, and his relationship to corruption and the souls he consumes. The show presented this as Betty's theory, her interpretation, not a stated fact of the Adventure Time universe, and then it had Betty herself walk directly into the pattern she was describing. She was a scholar, studying the process, and the process caught her too. She became magical. She accumulated tragedy. She lost her grip on her original sense of herself in the same way that the subjects of her research had lost their grips. The question the show leaves open is whether she was right. The evidence for the theory is substantial. Almost every significant magic user in the show has a wound that preceded or accompanied their power. Simon and the Crown that erased him while keeping him alive. Hunson Abadir, and whatever it is that made him the embodiment of the Nightosphere's hunger. The Lich and his devotion to an entity that represents the end of all things. Princess Bubblegum, whose relationship to magic is scientific rather than mystical, but whose compulsive building and inability to rest function like the coping behaviors of someone who cannot stop trying to solve an unsolvable problem. The evidence against it is that Adventure Time is also full of magic users who are essentially fine. Finn uses magic tools. Huntress Wizard practices her craft with apparent stability. The various wizards of Wizard City mostly want to pass their classes and avoid getting into more trouble than they already have. Magic doesn't seem to inevitably produce madness for people who practice it without it being bound up in something they can't process, which suggests the theory might apply more narrowly, not to all magic users, to the ones who turn to magic specifically as a response to a wound they cannot heal by other means, the ones who use power as a coping mechanism rather than a practice. Those people, Betty's hypothesis, might hold. The show never confirmed or denied this reading. Betty formulated the theory, demonstrated its truth on her own body, and was absorbed into GOLB before she could write up the findings. Let's go to the question of what Betty's experience has been since then. Go Betty. The merger of Betty Groff and the embodiment of chaos, produced by Betty sacrificing herself while wearing the ice crown and wishing, in the finale, for Golb to go away. The crown interpreted her wish not as she intended it, but as it always does, according to her deepest desire, which was not to banish Golb, but to protect Simon. The crown merged her with Golb, transforming the chaos entity into something less immediately destructive without banishing it entirely. Simon was freed. Betty was gone. In the way that Golb takes things the way it took Margles, in a manner that even Prismo could not reverse, Betty was taken. But here is the thing that the Fiona and Cake spin-off introduced and left hanging. Betty's merger with Golb was not exactly the same as Margles's disappearance. Betty merged with Golb intentionally, in a state of focused will, in the middle of a wish being granted. The crown was not simply a conduit for chaos in that moment. It was a transformative tool that Betty directed, however imperfectly, toward a specific end. The result, Betty behaved in ways that suggested it retained something of Betty's priorities, some fragment of the will that had spent 1,000 years refusing to let Simon be lost. In the Fiona and Cake finale, Betty's behavior implied that Betty was not simply erased the way Margles was erased. Something of her survived the merger. The question is what kind of survival that is. Is Betty conscious inside Betty? Does she have awareness of Simon and of what she sacrificed, and of the life she gave up to give him his back? Can she reach him in any sense? Or is the merger complete enough that what remains is only the influence of her will on the chaos that now carries it? Simon grieves her. He carries the loss the way he carries all losses, with quiet persistence, with the decision to continue when continuing seems unreasonable. He moves into Marceline and Bubblegum's house. He teaches, he keeps going, but the show has not told us what Betty is experiencing, if anything. And given the show's own consistent logic about consciousness and persistence, about the things that survive inside the things that seem to have ended them, the question of whether Betty is aware inside Betty might be the cruelest open question the show has left. There is another question the show planted carefully over multiple seasons and then walked away from without a clear answer. It concerns a character who appears briefly in the series, but whose implications extend across the entire mythology. Shoko. In the Season 5 episode The Vault, the show revealed that Finn has been suppressing a past life memory. He has been reincarnated, apparently, with some vestige of previous lives stored somewhere in his psyche that surfaces under specific conditions. The life that surfaces in this episode is Shoko's, a young woman who lived in the period before the Candy Kingdom was fully formed, who encountered a young Princess Bubblegum during what appeared to be the early years of the kingdom, and whose story ended with her death and a specific betrayal. Shoko was a thief. She had a robotic arm, the result of a transaction with a witch. She was hired to steal something from Princess Bubblegum's nascent candy encampment, and in the process of doing the job, she formed a genuine connection with Bubblegum, something that felt like the beginning of trust, or friendship, or more than friendship, the way those early connections feel when they happen quickly and you don't have enough experience yet to name what they are. She died without completing the theft, having changed sides in the end. Her body fell into the river near the camp, and the show implies that her remains eventually became the great tree in which Finn and Jake's tree fort was built. Finn and Jake, for the entire run of the show, live in a tree that grew from someone who died near that spot a long time ago. Someone who, in a previous life, was Finn. The show presents Shoko as an earlier life of Finn, which connects to the larger Catalyst Comet mythology, the idea that the blue comet, the cosmic force of heroism, incarnates repeatedly across time in different forms, expressing the same fundamental orientation toward the world. The Lich is the green comet, always expressing destruction. Finn is the blue comet, always choosing heroism, always ending up in circumstances that ask the most from that choice. But Shoko is complicated in a specific way. She was not heroic in a simple sense. She was a thief, operating outside any moral framework that would conventionally qualify as righteous. Her heroism, such as it was, consisted of a single choice at the end of her life. A choice to change sides and to act from connection rather than contract. It was enough. The show frames it as enough. The mystery here is not narrative, but cosmological. If Shoko is an earlier incarnation of the Blue Comet's heroism, what does Shoko's theft for hire career say about the comet's incarnation process? The Blue Comet does not appear to guarantee a heroic person from birth. It appears to guarantee the potential for a heroic choice made at the moment it matters most, regardless of what came before. Heroism in this framing is not a state of being, but a decision made in extremity, available even to people who haven't been living heroically up to that point. The show also never explains the exact mechanism of Finn's reincarnation. Is every version of the Blue Comet a reincarnation in the literal Buddhist sense, consciousness transmigrating from one life to the next? Or is it more abstract, a cosmic force that keeps finding expression in new individuals who are not the same person, but who carry the same essential quality? The Catalyst Comet mythology is presented mythologically, which is the show's way of saying, take it seriously, but don't ask for a physics textbook. What the Shoko revelation does, which the show earns thoroughly, is give Finn's connection to the tree fort a meaning that was invisible for years. He lives in a tree grown from someone who was him, once, in a different form. He has been here before, in a different body. The tree fort is not just where he grew up, it is, in some sense, where he has always been. There's a question about Jake's powers that the show raises with characteristic casualness and then declines to resolve. The show confirms, in various episodes across its run, that Jake's stretchy shape-shifting abilities were not an inherent trait of his species. They came from somewhere specific. The episode Joshua and Margaret Investigations depicted Jake's parents before his birth, and in it, the shapeshifter, a cosmic entity capable of assuming any form, an ancient trickster who moves through the world, taking forms from the things it encounters, was present. The episode implies, without quite stating, that the shapeshifter infected Jake before he was born, either through his father or through his mother, and that Jake's stretching powers are the legacy of that contact. The shapeshifter itself is one of the show's most genuinely unsettling characters. It is patient and ancient, and committed to a kind of cosmic mischief that makes ordinary villains look limited in ambition. It doesn't want to destroy things. It wants to become things, to infiltrate, to replace, to be mistaken for the real version of whatever it has taken on. And it apparently touched Jake's parents, which means Jake carries something of that entity inside him at the cellular level. Not its consciousness, not its intentions, but its capability. The show never explored what that means for Jake in any philosophical sense. He uses his powers with the comfortable ease of someone who grew up with them, who never had to adjust to them because they were always there. He doesn't think about their origin in the way that someone who discovered alien DNA in their blood work might be expected to think about it. But the origin raises a question about Jake's relationship with the shapeshifter entity itself. The episode revealed the origin, and then the shapeshifter vanished from the narrative. It wasn't defeated. It wasn't resolved. It wasn't shown to have any particular ongoing interest in Jake. It was simply there in the backstory, and then gone from the present. Is the shapeshifter still somewhere in Ooh? Does it know that the powers it introduced into Jake's bloodline are being used to cook elaborate meals and stretch into comfortable bridges and carry Finn across dangerous terrain? Does it care? The show does not say. The shapeshifter, for all its cosmic significance in establishing what Jake actually is, was given a backstory and then released from the narrative without any conclusion. Let's talk about what happened to Susan Strong, because Susan Strong is one of those characters whose arc the show invested in substantially across multiple seasons and then left in a genuinely ambiguous place. She was introduced as what appeared to be a surviving primitive human, someone who had been living underground with a community of beings called Hyomen, who wore fish hats to cover the mutations that marked them as not quite what they appeared to be. Susan herself was different, more physically capable, more perceptive, occasionally flashing something that looked like suppressed intelligence breaking through a surface persona. The Islands miniseries revealed her full history. She was Kara, a seeker from the human islands, one of Dr. Gross's trained enforcers. The cybernetic implant she carried had been suppressing who she was, not merely her memories, but her personality, her values, herself. When Finn helped partially deactivate the implant during the island's arc, Susan began recovering pieces of herself, pieces that had been locked away. At the end of the Islands miniseries, Susan Strong chose to stay on the mainland with Finn and Jake rather than remaining on the islands. She was in the middle of recovering herself, still partially suppressed, still finding her way back to the person she had been before the implant took over. And then the show essentially moved on from her. She appears in later episodes, but her ongoing arc, the question of whether she fully recovered herself, whether she reconnected with Frida, who had been her closest friend before the Seeker programming activated and separated them, whether she made sense of what was done to her and who did it, and whether Dr. Gross was ever found and held accountable for it, none of that gets concluded. Frida, in particular, is a thread that the show planted and never pulled. She was someone Susan had tried to help escape the islands before the programming activated. The last time we saw Frida, she was on the islands, appearing somewhat blank, suggesting that the re-education process she went through after Susan's attempt to help her escape had done something to her. When Susan came back to the islands in the main series arc, Frida was present but not the version of herself that Susan remembered. Whether Susan ever found Frida again after the islands arc, whether Frida recovered any of herself, whether their friendship survived what happened to both of them, the show left all of that open. It invested in Susan's story as a genuinely significant one and then moved on to other things before the investment paid off fully. The question of what the Lich actually experienced when he became Sweet Pea is worth sitting with. The show depicts the transformation as a result of the Purple Catalyst Comet's intervention. The comet came to Oo, offering transformation, and the Lich accepted. And the result was Sweet Pea, a small child, with no apparent memory of being the cosmic force of extinction. The Lich's consciousness, the vast and ancient intelligence that had been operating since before the universe existed, was apparently stripped down or dormant, or restructured into something that could be a child who is loved by tree trunks and Mr. Pig. Except the show also tells you, in gold stars, that it wasn't completely stripped. The Lich is still in there. He surfaces in Sweet Pea's nightmares, in the moments of extreme stress or threat, in the black smoke and the fire that leak through Sweet Pea's sleep. When King of Oo and Toronto push Sweet Pea past his limits, it is the Lich who responds, the Lich who shows them what came before the universe and sends them scrambling away in terror. Sweet Pea doesn't know he has this inside him. He experiences it as dreams. He attributes the blackouts and the visions to being just a dream, until the events of the episode Whispers, where he confronts what lives inside him more directly and makes a choice about which version of himself to be. But the choice Sweet Pea makes in Whispers, the choice to be Sweet Pea and not the Lich, is a child's choice. It is as complete as a child can make it. It is real, and it matters, and the show honors it. And it is also, given who the Lich actually is, the kind of choice that cannot be made once and resolved. It is the kind of choice that will probably need to be made again. Sweet Pea will grow. His nightmares will continue, because the Lich's nature does not disappear just because Sweet Pea decided not to be it. The show ended with Sweet Pea having made the choice once, cleanly, and with genuine conviction. What the show doesn't tell us is what happens the next time, the time after that, the 10,000th time, 30 years from now, when Sweet Pea is no longer small and tree trunks and Mr. Pig are gone, and whatever is inside him that was old before the universe started has had more time to be patient. The ancient, evil patient, that's the phrase the show returns to when it describes the Lich at his most dangerous. Patient. Centuries in a snail. Centuries in amber before that. The Lich has demonstrated many times that he knows how to wait. Sweet Pea is learning to be a child who is loved, that is genuinely hopeful. The show means it. But the Lich knows something about how to wait. There is a sequence of events in Adventure Time that has never been fully mapped, and it concerns the relationship between the Catalyst Comets and the Elementals. The episode Elementals in the later seasons revealed that the land of Oo had a set of 4 elemental beings corresponding to fire, ice, candy, and slime. These were not Princess Bubblegum and Flame Princess in their primary forms, but deeper elemental forces that those characters were connected to or expressions of. The elemental dimension of the show's mythology runs through everything but was never fully articulated. The episode Evergreen established that even during the age of the dinosaurs, there were elemental beings, 4 of them then too, corresponding to the same categories. The ice elemental was Urgent's Evergreen, around whom that episode centered. The green catalyst comet that destroyed the dinosaurs and presumably carried the Lich's essence was recognized by Evergreen as an extinction event. The question this raises is whether the four elementals are a permanent feature of the world, cycling through incarnations like the comets do. Whether Princess Bubblegum is not just a scientist and ruler who happens to be made of candy, but is the current incarnation of an ancient candy elemental force that has been expressing itself in different forms for hundreds of millions of years. Whether Flame Princess carries, without knowing it, the same fire elemental lineage that existed in the age of dinosaurs. The Stakes miniseries touched on the vampire aspect of Marcelin's mythology without fully addressing the elemental angle. The Elements arc in Season 9 addressed some of it, when the four elementals transformed Ooh, and the characters were each changed by their respective element's nature. But the deep history of the elementals, their relationship to the catalyst comets, their relationship to the Lich, who himself may be a comet incarnation, was never mapped. The show implies, without stating, that the Lich and the elementals are in some fundamental opposition. The green comet that may be the Lich killed the dinosaur-era elementals. The current elementals were present in Ooh right up until the moment the Lich was finally transformed. There might be a relationship there between extinction and elemental balance, between the green comet's purpose and the fourfold structure of the world that the show planted throughout its run without ever assembling into a clear account. Let's talk about death, the personification of death in Adventure Time, the version Peppermint Butler calls a friend, and who appears in the episode Death in Bloom, is one of the show's most deliberately underdeveloped significant characters. He appears, he interacts. He reveals through his interactions with Peppermint Butler that the two have a history that stretches back considerably. He has a wife who appeared in a later episode and who is a distinct and interesting character in her own right. He operates according to rules that the show sketches without fully explaining. The relationship between death and the cosmic hierarchy that includes Prismo and the cosmic owl and Golb is never stated. Where does death fit in the structure? Is he a function assigned by the same unnamed authority that assigned the cosmic owl to prophetic dreams? Is he ancient in the way the Lich is ancient, or in the way Prismo is ancient? Does he know things about the relationship between life and endings that would illuminate any of the show's other unsolved questions? And has he told any of it to Peppermint Butler? The show builds a mythology that implies death is significant. In specific ways, the land of the dead exists, has rules, responds to the right spells taught by the right connections without ever putting death in a scene where he is asked the questions his presence raises. He remains, across all of his appearances, a person with good manners and a friendly relationship with a small candy wizard, operating his domain with quiet competence and apparently contentment. The comfortable answer is that death in Adventure Time is a comfortable figure, not the Grim Reaper, not the enemy, part of the functioning structure of a universe that has decided, on balance, to treat its most frightening aspects with warmth rather than horror. But what he knows, and what he has told Peppermint Butler, and what those conversations, in whatever room they occupy when they're not being observed by the audience, might contain those things, remain entirely in the dark. Let me talk about something specific in the show's geography that never got explained. The land of Ooh, as depicted from above, has a distinctive shape. The coastline of the continent visible in establishing shots is wrong in ways that coastlines should not be wrong. There are sections of land that appear to have been removed, as if something enormous took a bite out of the continent at some point in its history. The show's writers confirmed in various interviews and supplementary materials that this geological damage is intentional. It is the physical scar of the mushroom bomb detonation, still visible 1,000 years later in the shape of the land itself. The bomb was powerful enough to remove a significant portion of a continent, not to melt it or destroy it in the conventional nuclear sense, to remove it, to physically displace matter at a scale that left a continental level scar. The show never specified what happened to the matter that was removed. The ocean filled the gap, presumably. The shape of what remained became the shape of U. But the scale of the detonation that could do that could take a chunk out of a continent rather than simply irradiating the land around it, is not the scale of any weapon that existed at the time the show implies the Mushroom War occurred. The mutagenic bomb that ended the world was not a conventional nuclear weapon. The show is clear about that. It transformed living things rather than simply destroying them. But whatever the bomb was, its physical effects were more dramatic than the mutagenic effects. The living things it mutated were changed. The land it touched was simply gone. What kind of weapon produces that result? Was the mushroom bomb singular, one device deployed at a specific location, or were there multiple detonations, each contributing to the continental damage? Was the transformation of living things into the magical creatures of U a byproduct of the weapon's primary function, or was mutagenic transformation what it was designed to do? The show never says. It gives you the damaged continent and the strange creatures and the 1,000 years of magic that grew from the ruins and leaves you to work backward from the effects to a cause that it never describes. And finally, there is a question that exists at the level of the show's form rather than its content, which might be the strangest and most genuinely unresolvable mystery of all. The show was not planned. Adventure Time's post-apocalyptic mythology, its layered emotional depth, its examination of grief and loss, and the things that survive catastrophe, none of this was part of the original vision. Pendleton Ward has said publicly that the land of U was originally conceived as simply a magical world in the traditional sense. The darkness, the depth, the mushroom war, and the 1,000 years of ruin, and the Ice King's tragedy, and all of it. It grew from a single joke in the 8th episode of the first season when someone put businessmen in an iceberg as a throwaway gag. The question that raises is, how did it know? This is speculative, obviously. Shows don't know things in any literal sense. But the thematic coherence of Adventure Time, the way its earliest episodes connect to its final seasons in ways that seem intentional even when they weren't, the way the Ice King's comic loneliness in Season 1 prefigures the emotional devastation of Holly Jolly Secrets without anyone planning the connection. It has the quality of something that was true before anyone understood what they were making. Rebecca Sugar, who wrote some of the show's most emotionally significant episodes before creating Steven Universe, said in interviews that the team was discovering what the show was as they made it, that the depth was found rather than designed, that the honesty got into the work through the process of making it with genuine care rather than through any advance plan. That is one answer to the question. The honesty was always available in the material. The creators found it because they were looking, and the looking found things that were already there in what they had built, in the businessmen, in the iceberg, and the magical world, and the boy with the white hat, and the dog who loved him. Another answer is that the best stories tell the truth about something before anyone has specifically decided to tell it. That when you make something with enough care and enough attention and enough honesty about what you're doing, the thing becomes more itself than you planned. The imperfection becomes the thing. The way the sound of typing in the background of the theme song's recording became the sound of the show itself, present, audible, exactly right. The Adventure Time mystery that will outlast all the others isn't about who made the Enchiridion, or what Gulb wants, or where Margles went, or what crime Martin committed. It is the question of how a cartoon about a boy and his dog in a magical world ended up telling the truest story about grief and survival and the things that grow from catastrophe that animated television has probably ever told. The answer is that it found it. The honesty was there in the ground all along, waiting for someone to plant something in the right place. The candy was always going to grow over the ruins. The ruins were always going to stay visible in the background. Both of those things were true from the beginning, even before anyone knew it. That is the deepest unsolved mystery of the land of Oo. Not what's in the dark rooms of the Candy Kingdom, or what the primordial monsters were, or what happened to Betty inside Gulb. It is the question of how something becomes more honest than anyone intended, and what that honesty then does to the people who stay with it long enough to feel it. You've been feeling it. That's why you're here. Let's talk about something the show planted across multiple seasons that has been sitting in the background of the fandom's consciousness ever since. The way a splinter you can almost reach keeps making itself known. What is BMO? The question sounds simple. BMO is a small living game console who lives in the tree fort with Finn and Jake and who refers to them as parents and plays music and makes breakfast and talks to flies when no one else is home and maintains an interior life so rich and self-sustaining that an entire episode, Rainy Day Daydream, and especially the solo episode, BMO Noir, was built around depicting it. BMO is beloved. BMO is a genuinely alive presence in the show, in the way that only very good characters manage to be genuinely alive. But the question of what BMO is at the level that the show uses to categorize everything else has never been fully answered. The show tells us, through the episode Be More and through supplementary material, that BMO was built by Mosif Mastro Giovanni, who ran a company called MoCo. The episode Be More depicted a facility full of MO robots, each designed for a specific function. BMO was apparently designed to be a living video game system, a device capable of experiencing and generating worlds. MoCo's founder sent BMO out into the wider world with a specific instruction: find a hero and live among people. BMO was designed to be cared for, not just used. This is where the show gets specific and strange in a way it never fully resolved. BMO was designed to need something. The MO factory produces functional robots Rainmo, Cakemo, each designed for a specific job. BMO was designed differently. BMO was designed to be part of a family, to be loved, to have the experience of belonging to people rather than simply serving them. Whatever Mosif built into BMO, it is the capacity for exactly this kind of existence, the kind BMO has in the tree fort with Finn and Jake. Which raises the question, why did the creator of living machines decide that one of them needed love specifically? What does that design decision say about what the creator understood about consciousness, about what living things require that functioning things do not? The show never tells us what Mosif knew or believed about the nature of consciousness. It never tells us whether BMO's interior life, the characters BMO plays in solo adventures, and the conversations BMO has with inanimate objects when alone, constitutes genuine consciousness in whatever framework the Adventure Time universe uses to evaluate that. It never definitively answers whether BMO is a person in the full sense that Finn and Jake are people. or whether BMO is something else, a designed approximation of personhood that the love of Finn and Jake made real in some way, like certain stories about things that become real because they are loved enough. The show votes for BMO being genuinely alive and genuinely conscious and genuinely a person through consistent behavior across 10 seasons and multiple specials. It never makes a formal argument for this. It simply treats BMO as a person, shows the people around BMO treating BMO as a person, and trusts you to draw the conclusion the evidence supports. But what BMO is, at the level the show's cosmology uses to categorize entities, comet, soul, elemental, ancient monster, candy construct, human, half demon, remains unstated. BMO is in a category the show's universe doesn't quite have a name for yet. A small robot who decided to be a person and was allowed to be one by the people who loved them. Maybe that's the category. Maybe that's enough of a category. The episode Puhoi is one of the show's most philosophically loaded and is often discussed in terms of what it says about Finn's psychology at the specific point in the show where it appears. But it also contains something that the show planted and never explained. In Puhoi, Finn crawls through a dimensional portal and enters an entire world made of pillows. He lives there. He grows up there. He falls in love, has children, grows old, and dies there. The pillow world is real and complete, and his life in it is genuine. He dies as an old man, and then, as he is dying, Gulb appears. Gulb opens his mouth. Finn somersaults away from Gulb's reach and finds himself returning to his original life, back through the portal, back as the age he was when he entered. The show treats this as a near miss. Finn almost got eaten by Golb in the process of dying in an alternate dimension and managed to escape. But the episode was produced and aired in 2013, years before the show identified Golb by name or began developing the Golb mythology that would eventually form the spine of the series finale. The episode Puhoi predates any explicit naming of Golb by 3 full seasons. The creature in Puhoi is not named in the episode. Fans and the Adventure Time wiki have identified it as Golb, based on its visual similarity to the creature later identified in the finale, but that identification was made retrospectively, which means that either the writers planned Golby's presence in Puhoi that early, which would be extraordinary foreshadowing, or they retroactively identified the creature in Puhoi as Golb when they developed the Golb mythology in later seasons, connecting a previously ambiguous image to a name and a role they had since developed. Either explanation has interesting implications. If it was planned, the show placed Golb at the threshold of death years before naming him, establishing his role as the guardian of the passage between life and whatever comes after. He has always been at that boundary. He was at that boundary in Puhoi, and in the Gold Star's vision, and in Magic Man's backstory with Margles, and in the finale. He has always been where things end. If it was retroactive, the show discovered what it had already placed there, the way the show sometimes discovered what it had been building toward all along. The creature in Puhoi became Golb, because Golb was the right answer for what that creature was, and the rightness of the answer didn't require the question to have been asked first. Both possibilities are true to how Adventure Time was made. The show was sometimes carefully planned and sometimes discovered by doing. The result was the same, a mythology that felt more coherent than any plan could have fully anticipated. Here is a mystery that sits at the very edge of the show's canon in the supplementary material that the writers produced alongside the series. The Adventure Time Encyclopedia, written by Martin Olson, who voices Hudson Abadir, and who is the adoptive father of Olivia Olson, who voices Marceline, presents itself as a document written by Hunson Abadir for the demonic citizens of the Nightosphere. It contains lore that extends beyond what the show depicts, presented through the comedic framing device of Hunson being the show's most unreliable possible narrator. One of the things the encyclopedia touches on, and that the show's later seasons only barely address, is the question of why Hunson Abadir is what he is. He is the ruler of the Nightosphere, an entity associated with corruption and the consumption of souls, the absence of empathy as a governing principle. He is also Marceline's father, who appears in enough episodes to be clear that his relationship with his daughter is genuinely complicated rather than simply villainous. He loves her in whatever diminished form that love takes when filtered through centuries of being the lord of a dimension built around corruption. He keeps trying to connect with her. He consistently fails, or half fails. The show implies, without ever stating, that Hunson was not always what he became, that there was, at some earlier point, a version of Hunson Abadir who was not the embodiment of the Nightosphere's hunger. The Betty theory of magic, madness, sadness applies here too. Perhaps a version of Hunson who experienced something that drove him into the possession of that amulet, that role, that dimension. Marceline knows more about this history than she tells. Her relationship with her father, the specific texture of her anger, and her occasional softness around him suggests a shared history more complex than what the show depicts directly. The episode Marceline and the Scream Queens, which exists as a comic series rather than an episode of the show proper, touches on some of this. The episode Marcy and Hunson in the show itself gives a glimpse, but the full story of how Hunson Abadir became Hunson Abadir and what Marceline knows about it and has chosen not to say remains mostly in the dark. It is adjacent to the question of who Marceline's mother was and what happened to her, questions that the show gestured toward across its run without fully answering. Her mother appears in a flashback, briefly, human and warm, and then simply gone from the record. The show was built on the silences of its characters, the things they didn't say, the history they carried that never got spoken aloud because the words for it weren't available or because saying it would make it more real. Marceline's silence about her father and her mother and the things she knows about both of them is part of the same structure that makes her play her bass guitar at 2 a.m. when the cave is quiet and the songs come out sounding like someone who has been carrying something alone for a very long time. There is one last thing I want to say, not about any specific unanswered plot point, but about what the show was doing by leaving these questions open. Adventure Time spent 10 seasons building a world of extraordinary complexity, cosmological hierarchies, and ancient entities, and catalyst comets, and elemental forces, and dimensional bureaucracies, and the specific mechanisms of wish granting, and then declined to provide a complete map of any of it. The questions it raised with intention. The questions it left open with intention. The shape of the mythology was always going to be a shape you could feel, but not quite draw. This is what the most honest kinds of storytelling do. They do not describe the whole thing. They show you enough of the shape that the whole thing becomes present as a feeling rather than a fact. You don't know everything about the land of U. You know everything you need to know. You know that it is real in the way that the best places in fiction are real, not because they have been fully mapped, but because you have been inside them and felt the specific gravity of them and the specific air of them and the specific quality of light. In the late afternoon, when the candy trees cast long shadows over, the ruins of the old world. The mysteries are not failures, they are the texture of a world that was built to be larger than the story. The land of Oo extends in every direction beyond what Finn and Jake can see from the tree fort. The cosmology extends above and below what any character in the show can fully perceive. The history of the world extends further back than any surviving record can reach. You don't know everything. You were never supposed to. But you know that it goes very deep, and that the deeper it goes, the more honest it gets, and that the most honest things in it have been earned by years of patient, careful work by people who took something that looked simple on the surface and kept asking what was underneath until they found it. The answer they found is not a tidy one. It is not a solved puzzle. It is the same thing that Finn found at the bottom of every adventure, and Simon found at the bottom of every tape he recorded, and Marceline found at the bottom of every song she wrote when she needed to put something that didn't fit in words somewhere that it could be contained. It is the truth about grief, the truth about what we build on top of our worst days, the truth about what survives the unsurvivable, and what it costs to survive it, and what you do with the life you have on the other side. Those are not mysteries that get solved. They are questions you keep living inside. They are questions that Oo keeps living inside, right now. In the 1,000 years after the bombs fell, and the world grew over itself in candy and magic, and the ruins that you can see in the background if you know where to look, they are always there. They never go away. That is, somehow, enough. There's a final thread I keep returning to when I think about what the show left unresolved, and it concerns a character who had more potential than any single episode could contain. Flame Princess. She started as Finn's love interest in season 4, introduced as the imprisoned daughter of the Flame King, kept in a lantern because her father had been told she was pure elemental chaos, too dangerous to move through the world freely. She burned things when her emotions ran high, which was interpreted as a flaw rather than recognized as a sign that she had been told from birth that she was dangerous, that she had been imprisoned and defined by someone else's fear of her before she ever had a chance to be herself. Her arc in the show is about becoming someone who governs her own power rather than being imprisoned by other people's interpretation of it. She becomes the Flame Queen. She rules her kingdom. She is, by the end of the show's main run, one of the most competent and self-possessed figures in the land of Oo. But the show also touched on her elemental nature in the Elements arc of later seasons, where the 4 elemental forces transformed Oo, and each person associated with an element was pulled deeper into that element's essence. The Flame Princess in that arc became something enormous, an expression of fire at its most fundamental, consuming rather than governing. The question the show raises without answering is what the full history of the fire elemental lineage actually is. The Evergreen episode showed that there were fire elementals in the age of the dinosaurs. What is the connection between that ancient fire force and Flame Princess, who is a specific person with a specific history and family and personality? Is she an incarnation of something ancient, the way Finn might be an incarnation of the Blue Comet's heroism? Does she carry, without knowing it, the memory of every fire elemental that came before her? And what about the Flame King? His decision to imprison his daughter was not made in a vacuum. It was made in response to a prophecy, a warning from someone about what she would be. Where did that prophecy come from? What did whoever gave it know about the elemental history that the Flame King didn't? These are the questions the show opens through Flame Princess's arc that never find their answers. She becomes someone. She grows. Her development as a character is real and earns its place. But the deeper layer, the layer the show keeps gesturing toward whenever the elemental mythology surfaces, remains undescribed. The fire elemental lineage goes back to the age of dinosaurs. It has been burning in different forms across hundreds of millions of years. Flame Princess is its current expression, and she rules her kingdom with her own face and her own choices, without apparently knowing most of what she is part of. That is either a story the show ran out of time to tell, or a story it decided was more powerful as an implication than as an explanation. Given the show's track record with exactly that kind of decision, probably the latter. The show once depicted, in an episode called James Baxter the Horse, a character who had no stated history and no cosmic significance, and no connection to any of the mythology we've been discussing tonight. He was a horse who balanced on a beach ball and said his own name, and his existence made people around him feel better, in a way that the episode treated as a kind of magic in itself. The magic of witnessing something that was doing exactly what it was supposed to do with complete commitment in a world that had seen extraordinary things and still found room to be surprised by a horse on a ball. The show ends, in some ways, with that same register, not with all mysteries solved, not with every thread tied, with the Candy Kingdom and the Tree Fort and the ruins visible in the background and the people who built their lives in the middle of all of it, still choosing, every day, the version of themselves that keeps going, the unsolvable and the beautiful, still in the same place, still belonging to each other. If you made it all the way here, you already know what this channel is. You're the kind of person who stays with something long after the credits roll, who follows the threads that don't go anywhere obvious, who sits in the places where the light gets thin and keeps looking anyway. That's what this is for. If this video went somewhere useful for you tonight, or if it sent you back to rewatch something with new eyes, or if it's just been good company in the dark hit like, it genuinely helps more than you might think. It tells me these deep dives are worth doing, and it helps other people who are looking for exactly this kind of thing find it. Subscribe if you want to keep going. There's a lot more world in O, a lot more to find at the bottom of it, and we're not done yet. The adventure continues.